watching PowerNation. Today on Carcass, Junkmail gets a few body modifications to make room for some bigger wheels and tires.
Plus, we address some safety issues on our interior by adding a roll cage, then tear it all apart to add some color. Hey guys, welcome to Carcass. We still have a lot of work to do before we can take our 78 DJ5 Jeep out on the trails, but it's made quite a transformation from the two-wheel drive Postal Jeep that first rolled in the shop. Our 1978 DJ5 Postal Jeep has been a blast to work on. We cleaned up the frame and prepped it for new suspension. We picked up a set of 1-ton axles and added bomb-proof goodies to help us handle anything the trail could throw at us. Then we slid them underneath our chassis, mounted up our 4-link suspension and coilover shocks. Next, we dropped in the drivetrain and added a 4-to-1 transfer case, taking it from 2-wheel drive to 4. We put the body back on and made some modifications to give us some room for all of our additions.
And we have a mailbag of stuff that we need to do. We need to fab up some bumpers, front and rear, and add a winch. We got to make some body mods because we have some clearance issues. We're going to get inside the cab, strip out the interior, and add a roll bar. Then we're going to come back out and throw on a fresh coat of paint. But the big question is where do we even start?
I think I'm going to take care of the winch and the front and rear bumpers.
Cool. I'm going to do the body mods.
Awesome.
On the front fender, it's going to be pretty basic. All we're going to do is follow the line from the side of the fender across the front, and then we'll arc it over here on the end, give it just a little bit of design. Using the tape as a guide, we'll use a cutoff wheel to make our modifications. Cutting them out this much should give us plenty of room for our 37-inch tall tires. Simple as that.
While Jeremy was cutting out the fenders, I took a few measurements for our winch plate and I've already transferred it to the computer. So now we can cut it on the CNC plasma table along with a few other brackets, and then once we get it assembled, I'll be ready to start on the bumpers. With the winch plate cut out, we can tack and weld in our riser brackets. These will lift our mounting plate up to match the contour of the frame, making everything level. Then I'll drop on the winch plate. That's going to be nice. And fully weld it in. With that in place, I can install our winch. All right, time to move on to the bumper.
With the clearance issues taken care of in the front of the Jeep, it's time to move to the back. Now you guys can pretty much see that these big tires are going to contact the body as the suspension flexes out. But the simple solution to that is to just come in here and cut a big chunk out of the rear quarter. We also plan on running the stock doors because we love the look of them, but there's an issue there as well. As you slide the door open, the corner of the door contacts the tire. Now I have a fix for that, but we'll get to that a little bit later. To get down to the quarter and get this whole thing started, I gotta slide the door out of the way. Now that our door is out of the way, I'll loosen a few bolts, that one broke, and remove the track. Just like in the front, I'll lay down our cut line using some masking tape. Now we can start cutting out our quarter, making sure to follow our line as close as possible.
With our winch plate in place, it's time to start on the front bumper setup. I kind of have a unique design in my head that starts with a hoop that goes around the grill, and then it'll tie into the front bumper. So right now I just have to cut this tube, put a couple bends in it, and then we'll be ready to put it on the truck. Right at 74. With our tube cut to length, I'll head over to the tubing bender. With the design I'm going for, the tube will need to be bent to 120 degrees on each side. With that done, I'll head over to the Jeep. Can you hold this while I tack it?
Sure. I'm good.
Now that our main grill hoop is in place, I'll head back over to the bender and start the main part of our front bumper. We have to bend it past 90 degrees in order to account for the spring back. Once bent, I'll use a grinder to notch the ends, set it in place, and drop in a few tacks. All right, just time to tack it. Then building off of the main hoop, I'll finish out the front bumper and add a plate to the front to give it a clean look. Now that I have the front plate tacked in, the front bumper setup is pretty much done. There's a couple things I want to do still, like add some tube caps here, and also run a bar on either side to connect the hoop in the front bumper. But once we're done with all that, we can move on to the back.
Now there's one more thing we have to take care of before we jump inside and tackle the interior. We plan on running the stock doors because we like the look of them and they're functional. But when you open the door, the corner hits the tire. Well, we came up with a solution on how to make this line so we can cut the corner off of it. If we just use the old piece of the quarter panel, set it up here on the door, I'll just trace this line and we'll get to cutting. All right, now all I gotta do is cap the edge of this door off here, take care of the sharp fender lip, and we're good to go. We tear into our interior, adding some support and safety measures with a few custom touches.
We made a lot of progress on the exterior of our Jeep. I finish welded the front bumper setup, and I also reinstalled the winch just to make sure everything fits, and it's all looking really good.
We took care of some clearance issues on the front fenders and the rear quarters. We notched out the door to fit around our bigger tires, and I even finished off the edge for a nice clean look.
I also fabricated the rear bumper, which was a lot simpler than the front, but kind of kept it the same style with the two tubes stacked on top of one another.
And now it's time to get to work on the inside. Inside, we got a little bit of work to do. We got to get rid of the seat and the package tray and then move on to bending up our roll bar. We'll start by taking out a few bolts that hold in our seat. Followed by the mail tray.
All right. All right.
Yeah, that ain't gonna work. With the seat out of the Jeep, we started cleaning up and we found something. The floor inside's basically shot, and the plan is to tie our down bar in up here, and that's just not gonna work with the shape that this thing is in. So what I wanna do is just quickly cut this out and replace it with a brand new one. That way, when the down bar comes in, we got something nice and strong to weld to.
While Jeremy's working on the floor, I'm gonna start in the back on the roll cage, and the first thing I gotta do is cut out some base plates on the bandsaw. For our plates, we're using some 1/8" steel cut into 3x5 rectangles. This will give us plenty of room for our roll cage to mount to. Once they're cut out, I'll head back over to the Jeep, grind off some of the old paint, add a few tacks to our mounting plates to hold them into place, then go back and finish welding them to the body. We've got our base plates welded in now, so we can start to measure for our main hoop, and Jeremy's gonna hold up a cheater tube that we have so we can figure out the length of the tube. 20.5, measure vertical, that's 27.25, plus whatever the bend is. If we add up the measurements we took plus the amount of tube it takes for the bend, we got 60 inches, but that's only half the hoop, so we multiply it by 2 to get 120, and we'll add a couple inches for a little bit of wiggle room, so we'll mark it at 122. Once marked, I'll take our tube over to the chop saw to make our cut. Then it's back to the tube bender. I'll make our first bend at 90 degrees. On a piece this big, I like to flip the machine vertically and check before bending the other side, making sure our bends are on the same plane. Perfect. Let's see how it fits. All right, this thing is fitting perfectly. It fits really tight to the body, so we can tack it in now, and then we can start working on the down bars. Looks like 42. With the measurement of our down bars, I'll just cut, notch, and tack them into place as well. Then we can repeat the same process with our crossbar and get it installed. You want to hold this up there?
Yeah.
And I'll tack it.
Sure. So, tight to that side, off of this side. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good. Whenever you're ready. With the floor in, Jimmy can now come up front and finish out our cage, and I'm going to transfer to the back, tie in our down bars to our chassis, and build a cover for our shock hoops. Using the plates that Jimmy made for our roll cage, I'll drill out a few holes, bolt in the bottom plate, and weld in our support tubes that attach to our frame. Doing this will help strengthen our down bars on our cage. Once this is done, I can head over to the slip roller and start making our cover for our shock hoops. Before installing it, I need to cut out some of the old floor so we can come back later and install our shock hoop braces. Let's see how this thing fits. That's pretty good. Let's weld it up. Well, with our cover and our cage in place, that pretty much wraps up the interior. Now we got to start prepping for some paint.
We tear everything apart so we can finish up our chassis, getting it ready for paint.
With everything wrapped up on the inside of Junkmail, it's time to rip the body off of this thing so I can take it down and start prepping for paint.
And I also have to take the chassis and suspension completely apart so I can finish weld it, add some gussets and supports where it needs it, and I'm going to clean the chassis and paint it too.
Jimmy, you want to put your eyes on the front? I'm going to pick the body up.
Yeah.
Good.
With everything blown apart, it's time to final weld the chassis. With the body out of the way, welding up all of our brackets and tabs is super easy. When welding this much, you want to make sure you don't stay in one area for too long. I like to bounce back and forth to let the metal cool. I finished welding all the brackets on the chassis, but I did find a crack up on the frame rail that I need to take care of. I'll start by cleaning up the area using a Benchmark Abrasives ZIRCONIA flat disc. They're manufactured using uniform particle size and a premium blend of ingredients that exceed other flat discs by packing up to 50% more abrasives on each flat. Benchmark's products are made to exact specifications to provide reliable quality products. Now that it's prepped, I'll weld up our crack, go back and grind it smooth. With that taken care of, we can start cleaning up our chassis. I'll be using a knotted carbon steel cut brush that we also got from Benchmark Abrasives. These carbon steel cups are great for cleaning up rust and removing paint on ferrous metal, aluminum, and other non-ferrous metals. Using a carbon brush on stainless creates contamination, which leads to rust. The knotted wire style brush we're using is best suited for heavy material removal like we have on our old Jeep frame. With our chassis prepped, it's finally time for some new paint. I did wipe everything down with a little bit of acetone to give us a good base for our new spray paint, and this stuff is going to protect it from the elements. On our first coat, I'm just giving it light coverage to give us a tacky surface to give our other coats something to adhere to. You want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area when spraying. We have a huge shop with an exhaust fan, but I put on my mask once I start applying heavier coats. That wraps up the paint for the chassis, but I still have to paint the 4-link bars and the axles a matching color. So once those are done, we can start putting this thing back together.
Bodywork is done. Now it's time to give Junkmail a facelift with a fresh coat of paint. Well, Jimmy's been down in the shop thrashing on the chassis. I've got the Jeep body in the booth and we're ready to lay down some paint. Now we're going to be paying homage to the old Postal Jeep theme, so our colors are going to be red, white, and blue. What I'm going to do is paint the top of the Jeep white, so what I have to do now is mask the bottom of the Jeep off, then we'll spray the top with some sealer and move on to some color. All right, with everything masked off, we'll go ahead and mix some sealer and start spraying. We'll be using a primer sealer that we got from Summit Racing mixed to a 5-to-1 ratio with a hardener. This is going to help fill in some of our sand scratches and seal the surface so we have a good base to lay down some color. We'll be applying 2 medium coats, letting it dry for up to 30 minutes between each application. Once our sealer is dry, we'll mix up our single stage white that we're using for our top. And I'll lay down 2 coats, allowing it to flash about 10 minutes between each coat. With our top sprayed, we're going to move on to our second color. So I'm going to mask the roof off so I can start laying down some paint. Now we know the body work is pretty crude, but we also know that this thing is an off-road rig and it's going to get beat up and scratched up when it's out on the trails. All we're looking to do here is change color and give it a completely different look. I'll mask and cover the white we just sprayed. Using a tack cloth, I'll clean one last time, making sure to get rid of any dust or dirt that may have been kicked up while we sprayed our top. With it clean, we'll spray the sealer on our body and our panels, just like we did for our roof. Now that the sealer has had time to dry, it's time to move on to some color. And just like the top, we're going to be spraying some single stage paint that we got from Summit Racing. And the color of choice is Royal Blue Pearl. This is mixed in a 4-to-1 ratio just like our white. Summit's single-stage paints offer a premium finish with exceptional durability. It's resistant to yellowing and doesn't need to be top-coated for UV protection. Since our paint is a pearl, we'll be laying it down with a 75% overlap to achieve maximum coverage. Spraying 3 medium wet coats, allowing for 5-minute dry times between each coat. For the final application, I'll be applying a drop coat to give us a uniformed look.
You know, this thing turned out really good, and I didn't realize it had metallic in it.
Yeah, it actually laid down really nice. How did the chassis turn out?
It turned out pretty good. I mean, it's spray paint, right, but it's gray. So otherwise, I mean, we got plumbing, wiring, got to get it running, and then we can hit the trail.
Then we can hit the trails. And I actually still have one more thing that I want to do on the paint side. We're going to lay down a red pinstripe on the top of the Jeep, but that pretty much wraps it up for us today. So if you guys like anything you've seen on the show, why don't you go to PowerNationTV.com. Jimmy and I will see you next time. Let's go take a look at this chassis.
Yeah, spray cans, man. I went through like a dozen.
Is that like way quicker than spray paint?
Yeah.